March 15th, 1956, 9:18 p.m. The atmosphere at Cotton Club froze solid. Vincent the Hammer DeLuca had just committed an act of pure insanity. He'd marched through that packed Harlem establishment, positioned himself over Bumpy Johnson's booth, and launched a stream of saliva directly into his eyes. Spit rolled down Bumpy's temple, across his pristine charcoal suit. 80 witnesses stood paralyzed. Nobody questioned what protocol demanded in Bumpy's domain. Violations of this magnitude guaranteed execution. Brutal, calculated, witnessed execution. Yet Bumpy remained motionless. He didn't flinch. He simply retrieved his linen napkin, cleaned his face methodically, and uttered 4 syllables that turned Vincent's courage to ice. Have a seat. Dine. The events that unfolded in the following 52 seconds would transform into the most legendary dining hall confrontation in Harlem's chronicles. Because when Bumpy Johnson ultimately struck, his actions were so rapid, so surgical, so utterly destructive that observers would dedicate decades attempting to articulate it. And Vincent, the Hammer DeLuca, the man who believed he could dominate the Emperor of Harlem, he never anticipated the knife coming. Before we dive into what Bumpy accomplished with that knife, do me a solid and demolish that like button.
And if you're not following, press that button immediately, because we're releasing these iconic Bumpy Johnson narratives every single day. And believe me, each one exceeds the previous. Now, let's dive in. To comprehend what transpired that evening at Cotton Club, you must grasp where Bumpy Johnson operated in 1956 and why an Italian enforcer would possess sufficient foolishness to expectorate in his presence. By the mid-1950s, Bumpy Johnson wasn't merely another Harlem criminal, he was a monument. For 17 years, he dominated the policy game in Harlem, shielded black enterprises from white syndicate extortion, and constructed something the Italian organizations couldn't fathom, a criminal operation founded on neighborhood loyalty, not exclusively terror. Bumpy didn't simply extract wealth from Harlem, he reinvested it continuously. When Mrs. Henderson's bakery on 127th Street faced closure by municipal authorities, Bumpy covered the $2,800 in delinquent taxes. When law enforcement invaded Pastor William's sanctuary seeking justification to demolish it, Bumpy placed one call and the persecution ceased. When Italian loan specialists attempted to exploit Harlem households, Bumpy's soldiers made those specialists vanish. This represented Bumpy's brilliance. He recognized that authentic authority wasn't measured by fear generation, it was calculated by loyalty unto death. And who was Bumpy Johnson?
By 1956, thousands in Harlem would have accepted death for Bumpy Johnson. But that variety of devotion rendered him threatening to the 5 organizations controlling New York's criminal landscape. The Italian syndicate coveted Harlem's numbers operation. It generated $5 million annually, and they captured 0% of it. They'd attempted violence previously. Bumpy had returned their soldiers in coffins. They'd attempted bargaining. Bumpy had declared Harlem unavailable at any cost. They'd attempted corrupting officials. Bumpy maintained superior political relationships than their organization. By 1956, the organizations were exhausting alternatives, and that's when they committed a catastrophic error. They attempted humiliation. The strategy was elementary. Deploy someone into Bumpy's domain, disgrace him visibly, demonstrate to Harlem that Bumpy Johnson could be degraded, render him vulnerable. If he ignored provocation, he'd forfeit authority. If he responded violently, the organizations could justify commencing total warfare. Regardless, the Italians calculated victory. That's where Vincent the Hammer DeLuca entered. Vincent was muscle in the Lucchese organization, 6'3", 255 pounds of strength and arrogance. He'd acquired his moniker shattering bones for loan collectors in Little Italy. He was vicious, he was brutal, and he was precisely the variety of ignorant the Lucchese's required for this assignment. Anthony Corallo, a Lucchese captain, summoned Vincent into his quarters in early March. "I have an assignment for you," Anthony stated, igniting a cigar. "Straightforward one. You enter Cotton Club next Thursday evening. Bumpy Johnson dines there every Thursday. Identical booth, identical schedule. You approach him, and you diminish him." Vincent smiled. "You want me to assault him? I want you to humiliate him. Expectorate in his presence. Challenge him before his own community. Demonstrate to Harlem that Bumpy Johnson isn't invincible."
And if he attacks me, Vincent questioned, then you have 25 of our soldiers outside positioned. We transform Cotton Club into a battlefield. We saturate Harlem crimson. Regardless, Bumpy fails.
Anthony pushed an envelope across the surface. 7,000 now, another 18,000 afterward, when it's finished. Vincent accepted the currency, and he should have recognized something immediately. He should have inquired why the Lucchese organization was compensating 25,000 merely to have someone spit in Bumpy Johnson's face. He should have questioned why they required that quantity of money to persuade someone to execute it. But Vincent was conceited. He believed he was formidable enough to enter Harlem and embarrass the sovereign. He believed incorrectly. What Vincent didn't comprehend, what Anthony Corallo didn't comprehend, was that Bumpy Johnson had discovered the scheme 13 days before its scheduled execution. Bumpy Johnson didn't survive 17 years dominating Harlem by experiencing surprises. He survived by maintaining surveillance everywhere, by anticipating threats before adversaries mobilized. And one of those sources was a busboy at the Italian social establishment where Anthony Corallo maintained his headquarters. His name was Jerome, a 21-year-old youth from Harlem who maintained 3 occupations supporting his grandmother. Bumpy had financed Jerome's grandmother's medical procedures 18 months earlier. Jerome had never dismissed that on March 2nd. The Lucchese's family's plan. Jerome was sanitizing glasses in the rear kitchen when he detected Anthony I conversing with Vincent DeLuca. He absorbed every syllable, the strategy, the compensation, the date. That evening, Jerome appeared at Minton's Playhouse and requested audience with Mr. Johnson. Bumpy encountered him in his private quarters. "What information you possess for me, young blood?" Jerome disclosed everything, the complete operation. Vincent DeLuca, Cotton Club, Thursday the 15th, 25 Lucchese soldiers positioned outside. When Jerome concluded, Bumpy remained silent for an extended moment. Then he accessed his desk compartment, extracted 1,500, and transferred it to Jerome. "You never experienced this conversation. You weren't present tonight. Comprehend?" "Yes, sir, Mr. Johnson." "Excellent. And Jerome, convey my regards to your grandmother." After Jerome departed, Bumpy sat in his quarters contemplating. He could abandon his Thursday dinner at Cotton Club. He could evade the confrontation completely. But that wasn't Bumpy's character. Retreating from conflict, even a foolish one, that demonstrated weakness. No, Bumpy was attending Cotton Club on Thursday like he perpetually did, and he was permitting Vincent DeLuca to execute his maneuver. But what Vincent didn't comprehend, what the Lucchese organization didn't comprehend, was that Bumpy Johnson didn't merely respond to circumstances, he orchestrated them. Over the subsequent 13 days, Bumpy established his own arrangements. He contacted a favor from 4 NYPD commanders who were indebted. "I require 20 patrol vehicles in Harlem on Thursday evening, 128th Street and Lenox, 9 p.m. I don't concern myself with justifications, but I require them there." What's occurring, Bumpy? Let's simply state the Italians are organizing a gathering they didn't authorize with the municipality. The commanders comprehended.
If the Lucchese attempted initiating warfare in Harlem, the NYPD would arrive to terminate it before the initial shot was discharged. Next, Bumpy contacted his own community, not combatants, not soldiers, ordinary Harlem citizens, establishment owners, taxi operators, educators, clergy. "Be at Cotton Club on Thursday evening. Bring your households. I'm purchasing dinner for 60 people. We're going to have a celebration." Finally, Bumpy trained. In his residence alone, he rehearsed his response repeatedly, not with a firearm, not with a blade, with a knife, because Bumpy comprehended something about authority that most men never discover. Sometimes the most devastating instrument isn't the deadliest one. It's the one March 15, 1956. Cotton Club was saturated by 8:45 p.m., not with criminals or hustlers, with households, educators, church citizens. Bumpy had personally invited 60 of Harlem's most honored residents, and they'd all appeared. Children were consuming fried catfish, grandmothers were drinking lemonade, jazz music performed softly in the atmosphere. It resembled a neighborhood celebration, which was precisely what Bumpy desired. He sat at his customary corner booth with Ellsworth Raymond and 2 city administrators, discussing blueprints for a new community center in Sugar Hill. He wore a charcoal gray suit, immaculate white shirt, blue tie. His knife and fork were arranged precisely beside his plate of smothered pork and collard greens. At 9:15 p.m., Vincent the Hammer DeLuca walked through the entrance. He was accompanied by 2 other Lucchese soldiers, both armed. They surveyed the space, observed the households, the children, the church ladies, and for an instant Vincent paused. This wasn't what he anticipated. He anticipated discovering Bumpy surrounded by criminals in an atmosphere where violence appeared logical. Instead, he was entering what resembled how Bumpy found out, like a family celebration.
But Vincent had already accepted 7,000. He had 25 more soldiers outside positioned. He committed to this operation. He couldn't withdraw now. Vincent walked across the establishment floor. Every conversation terminated, every fork suspended midway to every mouth. People recognized who Vincent was. They recognized what he represented, and they recognized what was imminent. Vincent reached Bumpy's booth. Bumpy didn't acknowledge him. He was cutting into his pork, concentrated on his meal like Vincent didn't exist. "You Bumpy Johnson?" Vincent asked, his voice sufficiently loud for the entire space to hear. Bumpy consumed a bite of pork, chewed deliberately, swallowed. Then he acknowledged him, his eyes composed, almost disinterested. "Who's inquiring?" "Vincent DeLuca, Lucchese Organization. I have a communication for you from my superiors." "I'm dining," Bumpy stated quietly. "Return tomorrow." That's when Vincent executed his maneuver. He leaned forward and spat directly in Bumpy's face. The space gasped. 80 people witnessed it occur. Saliva dripped down Bumpy's temple onto his charcoal suit. Ellsworth Raymond reached for his waistband, but Bumpy elevated one hand, halting him. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Bumpy calmly retrieved his linen napkin and cleaned his face methodically. He positioned the napkin down. Then he acknowledged Vincent DeLuca and stated 4 syllables that resonated through the silent establishment. "Have a seat. Dine." Vincent laughed. "You think I'm frightened of you, old man? You think—" He never completed the statement. Bumpy's hand moved faster than anyone in that space had ever witnessed a human being move. One moment, the knife was on the booth beside his plate. The next moment, it was embedded in Vincent DeLuca's right hand, securing it to the tablecloth. 4 times, punctured clean through flesh and tendon and bone. Vincent screamed.
He attempted to withdraw, but the knife was driven so deep it had pierced through the wooden booth underneath. He was literally nailed to Bumpy's booth. Bumpy stood up deliberately, fastened his jacket, and leaned close to Vincent's face. "You entered into my neighborhood," Bumpy stated, his voice so quiet only Vincent could detect it. "You disrespected me in front of my community, in front of their children, in front of their grandmothers. You believed that was going to render you formidable." Bumpy gripped Vincent's wrist, rotating it slightly. Vincent screamed again. "Let me clarify something to you, Vincent. Out there on those streets, you have 25 of your soldiers positioned to initiate warfare, but I have 20 NYPD squad vehicles parked 3 blocks away. You commence shooting. You don't escape from Harlem. Not tonight. Not ever." Vincent's eyes went, the night of March 15th, 1956, wide.
"And in here?" Bumpy gestured to the space. "You just disrespected me in front of 80 people who would perish for me. You think they're going to permit you to walk out of here if I authorize it?" Bumpy let that penetrate. Then he extracted the knife out of Vincent's hand with one sharp pull. Blood poured onto the white tablecloth. Vincent grabbed his wounded hand, stumbling backward. "Now evacuate from my establishment," Bumpy stated, his voice still composed. "And inform Anthony Corallo that if he desires to have a conversation about Harlem, he can utilize a telephone like a civilized human being. But if he ever dispatches another one of his messengers to spit in my presence, I won't utilize a knife next time." Vincent ran, literally ran out of Cotton Club, clutching his bleeding hand, his 2 backup soldiers following him out the entrance. The establishment stayed silent for exactly 7 seconds. Then someone initiated clapping, then someone else. Within moments, the entire space erupted in applause. Bumpy calmly sat back down, retrieved his knife and fork, and returned to consuming his pork like nothing had transpired. Ellsworth Raymond leaned over, grinning. "You orchestrated all of that, didn't you?" Bumpy smiled. "Jerome informed me 13 days ago. You think I was going to permit some punk from Little Italy catch me off guard?" "The knife, though," Ellsworth shook his head. "Where'd you conceive of that? Guns are loud, blades are messy, but a knife?" Bumpy shrugged. "A knife transmits a message. It states, I don't require a weapon to harm you. I can utilize whatever is on my dinner booth."
The narrative of what transpired at Cotton Club spread through New York's criminal world like wildfire. By the subsequent morning, every mobster from Philadelphia to Boston had heard about it. Bumpy Johnson had stopped a Lucchese soldier's hand to a booth with a dinner knife in front of 80 witnesses, in front of children and grandmothers, and the soldier had fled screaming.
The Lucchese organization called an emergency assembly. Anthony Corallo was furious, not at Bumpy, but at Vincent for failing so spectacularly. "You informed me you could manage him." "He moved so rapidly," Vincent stated, his hand wrapped in bloody bandages. "I didn't even detect." "You didn't detect a knife?" Anthony shouted. "How do you not detect a knife?" Tommy Lucchese, the boss himself, elevated his hand for silence. "Enough. The question isn't what malfunctioned. The question is, what do we do now?" "We go to warfare," Anthony stated immediately. "We have 250 soldiers. We take Harlem by force." Tommy shook his head. "You desire to initiate warfare in Harlem? Over what? Because some hothead got embarrassed? It's about authority." "Authority," Tommy laughed. "Bumpy Johnson just stabbed one of our guys with a knife in front of his whole neighborhood, and his neighborhood applauded him for it. You think we're going to acquire authority by invading Harlem? We're going to acquire a massacre. So what do we do?" Anthony demanded. Tommy lit a cigar. "We leave Bumpy Johnson alone. We concentrate on Brooklyn, the Bronx, Staten Island. But Harlem belongs to him, and attempting to take it is going to cost us more than it's worth." It was the third time in 3 years the Italian organizations had backed down from Bumpy Johnson. Not because they couldn't defeat him in conflict, but because they finally comprehended what Harlem already knew. Bumpy Johnson didn't win through violence. He won through intelligence, preparation, and loyalty. As for Vincent, the Hammer, DeLuca, he departed New York 5 days the knife that changed everything later. The Lucchese organization didn't execute him, but they didn't protect him either. Word on the street was he relocated to Miami, abandoned the life entirely, but he carried the scars on his right hand for the rest of his life. 4 small circular scars and a perfect knife pattern. A permanent reminder of the evening he disrespected Bumpy Johnson and learned that some men don't require firearms to be dangerous. Bumpy returned to Cotton Club the next Thursday evening. Same booth, same schedule. But this time, the establishment was even more saturated than usual. People desired to sit where Vincent had stood. They desired to see the booth where Bumpy had driven that knife through a mobster's hand. Cotton Club became legendary after that evening, and the proprietor, recognizing the narrative was beneficial for business, never replaced the booth. He kept it exactly as it was, bloodstain and all, like a museum artifact. The knife Bumpy had utilized, he kept it, framed it, suspended it behind the bar with a small plaque that read, "Authority isn't given, it's earned." March 15, 1956. Here's what that evening at Cotton Club really taught the criminal world. The most dangerous men aren't the loudest, they're the quietest. They're the ones who detect the punch coming 4 weeks before it's thrown. They're the ones who transform your attack into their victory. They're the ones who don't require a firearm because they've already won the conflict before it initiated. Bumpy Johnson lived by a code that most criminals never comprehended. Violence wasn't a solution. It was the final resort. And when you finally had to utilize it, it should be so precise, so calculated, so absolutely devastating that you'd never have to utilize it again. That's why Bumpy didn't shoot Vincent DeLuca. That's why he didn't stab him with a blade. He utilized a knife, a dinner knife, because the message was clear. I can harm you with anything. I can harm you in front of your worst adversaries and my best associates, and there's nothing you can do to prevent me. That's authentic authority. That's why Bumpy Johnson remained Emperor of Harlem until the day he perished. Not because he was the most violent, because he was the smartest.
Because he comprehended that authority isn't something you demand, it's something you earn, one calculated maneuver at a time. If this narrative got you hyped, hit that like button right now. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? We're releasing legendary Bumpy Johnson narratives every single day, and the next one is going to blow your mind. Drop a comment and inform me. Could Bumpy have managed this differently? Would you have utilized a knife or something else? And make sure you activate notifications, because next week, we're telling the narrative of how Bumpy Johnson walked into a police station unarmed and walked out with 4 corrupt cops behind bars. You don't want to miss that. Remember,
In Harlem, authority wasn't given, it was earned.